Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome into the program. My name is Joe Idoni at Tour Picks on Twitter, here on behalf of the at Tour Junkies, to present to you a picks and preview show for the latest LIV Golf event. LIV Golf Chicago. Rich Harvest Farms is on the schedule this week after a 6-week hiatus. It's been since August the 11th since we've seen the LIV Tour in action, in which they were last at the New Jersey course in Bedminster. They now travel up to Chicago to wrap up their season in one of the final 3 events of the year. Before we get started, wanted to mention everything that the Tour Junkies have going on sort of in their Nut Hut Discord right now. Plenty of good stuff. There is all kind of action in terms of college football picks. Right now, they are in fact running a survivor contest, a tiers contest that are basically starting week 3 of the NFL season. So you can still get in these now. They are active for like $20 a month. You will have access to all of my props and positional parlays and plays throughout the PGA Tour season. You will have, of course, DB's full card. You will have the Research Center, which will give you DFS projections, which is an aggregate of 5 different sources to get your proper ownership levels. You will get the email chain. You will get the Nut Hut emails, which of course include the all touted chalk bomb, which I of course have the honor of writing. If you were following it last week for the Fortinet Championship, you did pretty well. The chalk bomb is, I'm all right at this thing. I took Akshay Bhatia. I said, do not take him. He will implode your lineups. And he was trash. He missed the cut. He was terrible. He was like 16% owned, and everyone who had him had no shot of winning any money. Props to me. Props to the Tour Junkies. Make sure you check out their channel. You have Pad's betting card, DB's betting card. You will see all of my stuff in there as well. It is the best place to sort of access around the clock 24/7 golf coverage and content exclusively right to you in the Discord channel with access to all 3 of us. So make sure to give that a check. Okay, let's move on to LIV Golf Chicago. I'm excited to see the boys back in action. As I mentioned, it's been 6 weeks since we saw Cameron Smith run away with LIV Golf New Jersey. Coincidentally, he is also your defending champion at Chicago in an event in which he won by quite a bit last season. This event is being held once again at Rich Harvest Farm. So let's talk about the golf course here to get us sort of started. Relatively new in the terms of what you would consider the golf course architecture landscape here in the United States. This is a project and a property located in Sugar Grove, Illinois, outside of Chicago, that was originally started in 1987. So it's not that old. The project was sort of a pet project of a man named Jerry Rich. So Jerry Rich was a self-made businessman who developed a software program that basically aggregated stock exchange programs. So he brought all the stock exchange together, created this software program under the company named Rich Inc. Quite a name for a company. It reminds me of old Richie Rich, but good for him. So he legit started this golf course with one hole that was like, just, I want to build a golf hole, right? This started in 1987. The project wasn't actually finished until 1999. So it took 12 years for it to develop all 18 holes and officially open as a private golf course, a high, upstanding, super elite, rich of the rich, bougie type golf course outside of Chicago. Within the first 3 years, it was easily voted inside the Golf Digest top 100 courses in the USA. It was listed as one of the top 5 new private courses in the USA. I would say the defining feature of this course are some of the narrow fairways, the overall magnitude of the acreage of just the property in general. Now, while the property is vast and wide, many of the fairways are not. And I would say probably like, if you were to go play this place, what you would walk away remembering is a lot of the cool rock architecture that sort of protects many of the greens and borders and bunkers in some of the streams that weave throughout the golf course. That's what sort of sticks out to me more than anything. The course is also home to the Northern Illinois Huskies golf team because Mr. Jerry Rich was an alumni and one of the more prestigious alumni for the Huskies up there. It notably hosted the 2009 Solheim Cup just 10 years after opening, the 2017 men's and women's NCAA championships. Most recently, the 2021 Arnold Palmer Cup was held at Rich Harvest Farms. And then, of course, the 2022 version of LIV Golf Chicago was held here. Let me go over the scorecard this year because we've got some changes. So the front nine is a par 37. So the front nine is nearly 4,000 yards. It is a beast. There are 6 par 4s that range from 402 to 402 to 451 total yards. So not insane for the par 4s, but just having 6 of them and nothing really shorter than that, I think will present some challenges. There are 2 par 5s on this side. The first is 552 yards, which will play as the second hole, and then the sixth hole, which will go out all the way to 600 yards. The back nine is where we're going to see some changes this year. So only 3,400 yards. It is a par 34. It features 3 par 3s, 2 of which are over 210 yards. And those sort of come on holes 15 and holes 12. The 17th hole, which is just 160 yards, is going to play as the party hole. We're going to have the setup. They're going to be putting the pins in locations that they're hoping for a hole in one. They're hoping for another Chase Koepka beer shower and to take over social media once again with some viral footage of a hole in one. That's what they want. That's what they're going to set it up as. We'll see if we actually get that. But tucked in the 17th hole that I mentioned is just that short little par 3. The closing 3 par 4s on the card, which are number 14, number 16, and number 18. Listen to these yardages. Number 14 is a 491-yard par 4. That's the shortest of the 3. 16 can play up to 495, and 18, the closing hole, which actually in the 2022 edition of this tournament played as a closing par 5. They are moving the yardage up slightly, but playing it as a par 4 this year. So it's going to be 504 yards for the final closing hole. There's 1 par 5 on the back. That is hole number 10. So after hole 10, basically 11 through 18 are all the par 4s and par 3s. That 10th hole on the yardage card is scheduled to be 626 yards. It is a little bit of a dogleg right. It is well protected. I imagine there are a few players in the field that can get there, notably like Bryson and probably Peter Uihlein, who's leading the tour in driving distance, and Dean Burmeister. Dean has led the tour in terms of driving distance in 4 out of the last 5 events. So he's really got it honed in and picked up some nice distance off the tee with the driver. So if you go and play this course, their featured signature hole is called the Devil's Elbow. That plays as the 4th hole. However, when I look at that's what it says on the Rich Harvest Farm scorecard. That's what you will read about everywhere online. Andy Johnson, who is a friend of mine, actually wrote a really nice piece on Rich Harvest Farms back in 2017 that you are free to reference on the Friday website. It goes into really good detail about the course, and he pretty much obliterated the design in terms of quality. He hated the course, but there are some quality notes in there to get an idea of what these guys will face. It is not going to play as the 4th hole this week. That's because on the scorecard, LIV Golf has the 4th hole as a par 3. It looks to me, the way in looking at the map that they have this laid out, it's going to play as the 3rd hole. It is a dogleg left par 4 that plays over a little stream that ends up, the stream runs across the tee box and then pretty much up the left side of the hole. What makes this unique is there is an extreme, like to the max narrow corridor off the tee that you go through from the tee box. And basically the only way to hit the fairway here is to hit a slingy draw in there, and the fairway maxes out at about 20 yards wide. This hole wreaked havoc at the Solheim Cup. It wreaked havoc at some of the NCAA championships that were held there, and obviously played as the toughest hole on the course, despite not being the longest hole on the course in both of those events by a good margin. Another notable feature of the golf course is the greens are small. They are tiny. They are very, very slopey as well. So greens in regulation, I expect an uptick in terms of what I'm looking for in regards to player stats and significant sort of categories that I'm looking to isolate and attempt to try and find some betting value this week on the board. Some comments, player comments. So the transcripts are out from the player interviews. I read through all three of them. I didn't take a lot from the Dustin Johnson interview, as you sort of never can. Patrick Reed did give some insight. Uh, Brooks and Cam, their interview was pretty good, and they talked a lot, most notably about how the course is much different this year. So the 18th hole is very different. 17 looks totally different with the surrounding grandstands. And they both mentioned the rain that has come into the Chicago area this week. The practice rounds today were delayed, and players only got to play a couple holes. Tuesday was basically a washout day as well. And this course last year played so tough to a degree because they talked about how firm the golf course was. The wind was up. The wind was up. The ground was firm. That's what made it hard. I don't think we get that this year. Judging by what the players are saying across the board, and most specifically what Cam and Brooks talked about. DJ and Patrick Reed talked about very similar things. Reed mentioned how the rough looks down a little bit this year, and the course is playing much softer, obviously, for that rain. So, another quote that I kind of wanted to touch on here, and an interesting element this season, as only 3 events remain on the LIV Tour schedule, is this idea of the drop zone. Kind of a creative name, but there are several players that fall into this category. And what it is players that are eligible to be replaced next year on the LIV Golf Tour if you are in the bottom, I believe, 4 guys. So both teammates here in terms of Brooks and Cam have players that are on this list right now that need to have a couple of good weeks to remain on the tour. Cam has Jediah Morgan. James Pyatt is on this list. Shiwon Kim is, of course, on this list as he's been the worst player on the tour. And interestingly enough, Chase Koepka, Brooks' teammate, is on the list and potentially not on his team next year. And here's what Brooks sort of had to say about it. Quote, "Yeah, we spent the last 2 weeks together. He's come to practice with me each and every day, just trying to see what's going on and really take a deep dive into how he can play his best and kind of switch that up. Not too much, but not results focused only this week. Trying to switch that up and not put so much pressure on himself. Just go out and play golf and work on the things he's been working on the last 2 weeks." So Brooks didn't say a whole lot there, but he's thinking about it. And what I really drew from that conversation and that quote is how Brooks has been working. He's been traveling back and forth to Italy with Claude Harmon, with his swing coach. He's been putting in that work, and it appears that Chase has been doing so with him. And I believe Chase had his best finish of last season with a top 10 at this event in Chicago. So he's going to need a good performance here. He's going to need a good performance in Saudi Arabia and in Miami to wrap up the season in order to maintain his status for 2024 and beyond. Other notes. Cameron Smith is leading the season long individual champion race right now, and he can actually wrap that up this week. So, the massive payday that we know includes obviously Dustin Johnson won that event and secured it last year during the Miami event. Cam can actually wrap this thing up this week to the point where no one else could catch him. And here's how he does it. He needs a win this week, and he needs Taylor Gooch, who is his closest pursuer, who is currently in second, to finish outside of the top 3. So Taylor Gooch not on the podium. Cam Smith lifting a trophy. There's your individual champion for the year 2022 on the LIV Tour. So a lot to play for. Obviously a huge payday. And Cam, not a whole lot going on in terms of preparations for major championships or an event like the Ryder Cup to really get in his way. I imagine he is really sort of honed in and focused on this event. Before we leave, I just want to touch base on a couple of more of the individual statistics leaders for the season on LIV Tour. Driving distance. So here are your top 3 in the major stat categories, because It's difficult to track this stuff. I got these numbers from Live Golf Media, so this is what they have so far on the season in totality. The leaders in driving distance on the year in order: Uline, Burmeister, Johnson. In terms of fairways hit, so driving accuracy, it goes Stenson, Answer, Bland. In terms of greens in regulation this year on the Live Tour, it is Mito Pereira, it is Brooks Koepka. It is Paul Casey. In terms of scrambling this year on the Live Tour, top three are Taylor Gooch, Ian Poulter, Patrick Reed. And in terms of putting, guess who's the best putter on the Live Tour? Guess who's the best putter in the world? It's Cameron Smith by a pretty good margin. It's Patrick Reed and it's David Puig in the final spot. Before we move on to sort of the betting pick segment, I will mention that there are two events left on the schedule. We have another couple of weeks off here. They will go to Jeddah on October 13th through the 15th. And then the following week, they will wrap up their season once again at Trump Doral in Miami on October 20th through the 22nd. I will be there again this year. I plan on taking the family. I plan on enjoying myself. And I hope to be able to do a good digestive piece at the end of it, like I did last year, sort of summarizing my experience at the event, what I thought that they did improve on, what I thought that they still are missing on. So I hope that hopefully that will provide some sort of context and for your own entertainment on what my experience is like. Okay. Let's without further ado, let's bring in the betting board here. Just one moment. Okay, so the odds are scattered. If you're out in Vegas, you have access to Circa Sportsbook. If you have access to Circa or have someone with it, I would recommend putting your dollars there. They have the best odds across the board this week on all the live players, almost exclusively. Bet Online has a decent offering. DraftKings is available in some states. FanDuel, I believe, is available in some limited states. There is Bet365. Occasionally we'll have some. It all kind of depends on where you're at in terms of the offering. And that comes down, once again, as I've mentioned before, to the compliance agreement documents that Liv has to submit to each state that they failed to do, which is kind of unexplainable that they weren't able to get that done. But I'm going to pull these up on the screen. I will mention the guys that I like. I will mention the guys that I don't like. And I will mention the actual odds that I took if they differ here. So at the top of the board, as you can see, you've got Cameron Smith there at 7.5 to 1, Bryson at 10 to 1, Patrick Reed at 16, DJ is 16 to 1, Taylor Gooch is 16 to 1, Brooks is 16 to 1. Here's what I don't love. I don't love this course for Bryson. It's a long course. Um, I think that many will gravitate toward a 10 to 1 number there. And I just don't love the fit in terms of what I think is a great setup for Bryson, especially with the rough down. And especially with the golf course playing much softer. I think the importance of hitting fairways and these tiny greens will be of greater importance. So here's my first bet. You probably could have guessed it by some of the stuff that I said sort of leading off here, but it's Brooks Koepka. Just one moment here. I'm just attempting to pull everything in. There we go. So the number that I got on Brooks that Circa is currently hanging is plus 18.5 to 1. I think that's a fantastic bet. You can't really get that number on Brooks at a lot of the major championships, and you probably won't next year. I think for I guess you can call them very outer skeleton sources that I know in the Koepka camp, he's taking the Ryder Cup extremely serious. We know he had the kid. He's had some time now to sort of digest all of that, and he has gotten himself back in the lab and back to work. This ultimately, to me, amounts basically to a play on Liv being off for 6 weeks. And I think the majority of players, and this is more of a mindset narrative that I'm kind of taking, have essentially taken a small vacation. And I worry about the lack of preparation. I worry about the lack of tournament reps recently. And I worry about the lack of high-end competitive golf for a lot of these guys. Have they played some casual rounds? I'm certain. Have they been to the driving range? I'm more than certain. Have they put in the same amount of preparation and work over the last, call it 20 days, 2 to 3 weeks, right? That Brooks Koepka has? I highly doubt it. He's been with Claude Harmon every day. He talked about it. He went to Italy with Team USA. He took a scouting trip to sort of get used to that golf course, and a course that is going to demand accuracy off the tee, which he talked about being a focal point of his work with Claude, is really being able to hone in the distribution and the miss off the tee with the driver. That's where he's putting the bulk of his energy. That's where he's putting the bulk of his work. And I think that that is a successful trait that is going to parlay this week into some success. Now, he's the only guy in the field that's playing in the Ryder Cup. No one in the Ryder Cup has more major championship success than Brooks Koepka. Am I worried that he is overlooking LIV Golf Chicago for the Ryder Cup? Yes, I think it's a valid concern. However, on the flip side, I think you can also turn that into a positive. He's put in more work than anyone over the last 3 weeks. I am confident in that, or just as much as anyone. There's really no pressure on his shoulders this week other than to go out there and play good golf. And in this same exact scenario, right? Before the Masters, Liv had an event in Orlando. Brooks went out and won that event. Um, he stepped into the Masters and continued his form and finished second there. I think that he looks at these weeks before major championships somewhat differently than other players do. And it's ultimately not so much results driven, it's swing driven. It's doing things correctly, doing his process correctly, taking his time, monitoring his steps, the same mental approach to gear himself up for a big event. And ultimately, while you may not be putting all your energy into winning, when you do those little things, the wins come. I mentioned his ability to hit greens in regulation. Hitting 71% on the year is incredible. He played terrible here last year. He himself talked about that in his press conference, that he was coming straight from a honeymoon and not practicing whatsoever. And he actually said, I was, when asked about the golf course, he said, I was busy sobering up and actually don't remember that much. Um, LOL, classic Brooks there. Ultimately, what is amounts to a similar vacation, I think, for a lot of these players is not the same situation Koepka is coming into this event this year. I think we get a focused Brooks, and I think 18 and a half, hell, even 16 to 1, I believe is a great, valuable bet, given this board and the amount of players that I think can win. And I think that he has a very high likelihood of doing so. Moving down this odds board, I've seen some love. My boy Matt likes Joaquin Neiman. For me, he's just played terrible on the year, and I would like to see some better signs. Burmeister has been getting things going in the right direction. I want to talk about Harold Varner. 28 to 1 on Harold. I mentioned some of the statistical stuff with Harold, and here's what he's done. And really, where he's played his best, and there have been some big up and downs and peaks and valleys this season for Harold. The four mainland United States American events, he's been fantastic. And this, I think, slides into that mold. Fourth at Tulsa, one Live Golf DC, sixth at the Greenbrier, but he was right there. Like, he was making a lot of things happen at the Greenbrier. I had a bet on him. So there was, I mean, obviously it felt like it was Bryson's, but he could have easily finished second in that event, or at least made a podium finish, in my opinion. 19th in the other one at Live Bedminster. So they're all top 20s, three top sixes, two top fives, and a win in the four mainland United States golf tournaments on the Live Tour this season. At the Greenbrier, and this was just 2 events ago, Harold Varner had one of the most impressive approach in greens and regulation weeks that I have honestly ever seen. And that's hard to say when you have a guy shoot 58 on the final day, but Harold was unbelievable. Round one, he hit 17 out of 18 greens in regulation. Round two, He hit 17 out of 18 greens in regulation. Round 3, guess how many greens in regulation he hit? 17 out of 18. Harold Varner hit 51 out of the 54 potential greens he could have hit for the entire tournament. That's like 95%. That is absolute dart season and locked in with your irons. If you can remember, the other thing with Tulsa, which he finished in the top 5 at, is it was a really wet week. They had experienced a lot of rain that week. There were spots where it was downright muddy. It was mostly lift clean in place all week, and he was able to really take advantage of that with his irons. Um, Greenbrier was also pretty wet. They had rain on a couple days. I remember Bryson finishing it in the rain on the final day. Those are the weeks I think he really plays his best with his iron play. So dart season is wide open for Harold. And then moving down, you'll see him here on this list at 28 to 1. I've got a 35 to 1. Across 2 seasons now, right? 2022, 2023. If I gave you a handful of guesses, now you can probably guess who I'm talking about. But before this, if I had given you 3 guesses at who has the most podium finishes on the LIV Tour, meaning either a first, second, or third in all the events that have ever taken place on LIV, what would your guesses be? My imagination would say number 1, Dustin Johnson, number 2, Cameron Smith, and 3 would probably be Koepka. You'd be wrong. It's Brandon Grace. He has 5 podium finishes throughout his LIV career. He's had 3 of those this year. A really solid year. Very underrated because he hasn't gotten the win. But in terms of the individual standings, he's got 112 points on the year. Do I know how the points are calculated? No. Do you know how the points are calculated? No. But I can tell you one thing, that's more points than Dustin Johnson, who has a win. That's more points than Bryson DeChambeau, who has a win. That's more points than Harold, who has a win. All guys with wins this year on tour. Brandon Grace has managed to outpace all of them in the individual standings, and he's quietly inside the top 5. He makes a move this week, and he's right in there inside the top 3. Great opportunity for Brandon Grace, who's been playing really solid. The 3 courses, and I mentioned this, was Harold. The 3 that I think are absolutely comps to Rich Harvest Farms for me, and the best comps we have available at this time are Tulsa, DC, and Jersey. He finished 6th in 1. He finished 2nd in DC, and he lost in a playoff in Tulsa. Like I mentioned, his consistency throughout the LIV Tour, he brings it every time he plays. He's been the best player on that Stinger team, despite Burmeister and Oosthuizen getting a lot of the love. Very quietly underrated performances throughout his time on the LIV Tour. I like Brendan Grace. I got a 35 to 1, which is still available at Circa Sportsbook. I don't mind the 28, but if you can get a 35, you take the 35. I saw this question posed on Twitter about a week ago, and it talked about, like, do you move money from one outlet or one book to another book if they have better numbers? But you have $0 on book B, you have 500 on book A, right? Book A is posting a 28 to 1 on Brendan Grace. Book B is posting a 35. You move the funds, guys. You take the bigger number, you shop the odds. Hitting a golf winner is so hard, and getting an extra 7 to 1 on a player historically, if you're looking at this thing from any sort of long-term perspective, will always be the better bet for you. Those are my picks this week. It's Koepka, it's Varner, it's Grace, it's LIV Golf Chicago. I'm Tour Picks here on behalf of the Tour Junkies. I hope that you enjoyed this preview for LIV Golf Chicago. If you have enjoyed these this season, please drop a comment on the YouTube page. Please give it a thumbs up. Please feel free to share it with a friend or share it online. All of your support goes a great way as we look to sort of re-engage, and we're going to sit down with the TJ guys and discuss this offseason, where we want this thing to potentially go next year. So any support that you guys could throw my way so that they know that people enjoy this content, people like this video. I think it's unique enough and not many people are doing it. I hope that you enjoy the aspects of this in terms of giving you some history on the course, giving you some stats breakdown from the tour, and of course, giving you my picks. We've had 2 winners on the season. We're looking for number 3. Best of luck to you. God bless. Hope you have a great day. Thanks for checking out the show. Tour Picks, I'm out. Peace.